Hi guys, this is Zach from Watches on You, and today I'm taking a look at the IWC Portugieser hand wound 8 days edition 150 years. So this is part of IWC's limited edition collection of watches that they released for the 150th anniversary, and this is, in my opinion, it's kind of the dress watch edition of the collection. They do have the Paul Weber 150 years, which also is, but this is kind of the more conservative dress watch, I'll put it that way. So right away, I'm going to kind of go over a little bit about this watch. So this has, as you can tell by the name, an 8-day power reserve, and it has an in-house IWC hand-wound movement. And so what they did with this watch, in addition to having that, but it also has a lacquered dial, which is special for the 150th anniversary edition, and then these beautiful blued hands. So now before I actually show you the movement and go into a little bit more depth about that, let's go over the case and some of the other aesthetics of this timepiece. So the case on this watch is 43.2 millimeters in diameter and 12.3 millimeters thick. I think that the thickness is fine. I think that the 43 millimeter size, though, in diameter is a bit too large for this. I think that it should be about more like 38, in my opinion, which is a lot smaller than this is, maybe up to 40. But I mean, IWC is kind of known for making larger size timepieces. That's kind of their niche in the market. As like the Big Pilot, for example, that's a very large watch, and yet they do it, but that's a pilot's watch. But I think for this dress watch, I think it would have been better if they kept it smaller. Maybe they could have brought it up to down to 40 millimeters instead of 43. They don't necessarily need to go any smaller than that. I just think that would have been nicer. I think 43 is really a size that should be reserved almost exclusively for sports watches. I think that for a dress watch, you kind of want a little bit smaller. And also, I think that would help IWC in the fact that it would fit a lot more people's wrists, as there are many people out there that have too small of a wrist to wear a 43 millimeter watch, let alone a 43 millimeter dress watch. But that's just kind of my opinion on the case sizing. Overall, the case is finished fantastically, though. You have polishing on the whole front, top of the case, and then on the sides of the case you have brushing. And everything is done fantastically. Edges are super sharp, super clean. The polishing is a very high polish, perfect mirror, and then the brushing is a very high quality brushing as well. So now let's go back to the dial and let's get into the movement a little bit. So the dial, as I said, is a lacquer dial with these heat blued hands. It also has the heat blued running second hand down at 6 o'clock as well. And you can see that this has it is a polar white dial, which I think is fantastic and really lends to this being a dress watch. I love the design of this dial. It kind of has a little vintage feel to it, especially with that running seconds track. I don't know why, but that font just kind of really looks like a nice vintage watch, and I really like that aspect about this watch. I think that the dial design is absolutely fantastic. You get a date also at 3 o'clock, and that is a white date wheel, as you can see, and it does blend into the dial very well. However, I personally would prefer if it had no date. I like no-date watches, and I think this is kind of a harkening back to the heritage kind of thing with this watch being a 150th anniversary timepiece. I think it would have been cool if they did it with no date, but that's just me. I personally prefer no-date watches, and I think brands in general, almost every watch brand, they just don't have a lot of no-date offerings, and I think that they should think about reconsidering that, I'm sure there are many more like me where they kind of appreciate the simplicity of a no-date timepiece, and I really love when a dial is just perfectly symmetrical without a date. I just think nothing beats that. And also, I mean, nowadays, I'm not going to be a person who denies the existence of the iPhone. When you're out, if you need to know the date, you can always just take your phone out of your pocket. The point of watches isn't necessarily to tell time anymore. It's to have something that you can enjoy and appreciate the kind of complexity of it, and just kind of have as a more, a better experience when telling the time, is kind of what they're for. So I think that more no-date watches, I think, would be cool to see from all brands, and that's not just IWC. So now let's go to this case back. So here you can see the movement. So the movement is a 59215 caliber movement. It's a manual wound caliber. It's an 8-day power reserve, or 192 hours. Beats at 4 hertz, and It has beautiful finishing, as you can see. It has this nice Côte de Genève all the way across the movement. And one thing I have to hand it to IWC, when a lot of companies do edition watches on the sapphire case back, in order to like show that it's a limited edition watch, what they'll usually do is put some kind of graphic on the sapphire crystal, and then you basically blocks out the entire movement. I really love how IWC did this, where they just put the medallion inlaid into the movement itself instead of on the sapphire. I think that that just looks so much more elegant, and it still allows you to have the perfect view of the movement, which I absolutely love. I think more brands should be doing things like this to their movements when they have a limited edition timepiece, instead of going over the crystal like some other watches, like a lot of anniversary and limited edition timepieces do. So I really commend IWC for doing that. I think it looks fantastic, and you can still see the entire movement, which I think is great. So you can see, though, you do actually get a power reserve indication on this watch. With having an 8-day power reserve, I think that it should just kind of display that it has that, but I really like that it has it on the back of the dial. It continues it keeps the dial more simplistic, but you still get that complication on the case back, which I think is fantastic. And see, it says 8 days right there as well. So as I wind this, and the barrel is actually up there, you can watch that spin as I wind it, but as I wind it, you can see that the hand on the power reserve advances as well as I wind up this movement. So here I go, and you can see that it is moving. I will say that it is a little bit more stiff of a winding, and I think that's just due to the fact that it has a much larger mainspring to facilitate the extra power reserve, but I think it's not too bad of a thing, and I think the benefit you're getting with that 8-day power reserve is definitely outweighs the little bit harder winding. And I think, so I'll go on a wrist shot here, but just talking a little bit more about that winding, I think that the 8-day power reserve is definitely something that shouldn't be underestimated, as this is a manual wind watch. And that's really the problem with manual wind watches that people don't like, is that if you, on most watches, the standard power reserve, if they're mechanical, not automatic, you're going to set it down, you might not wear it for 2 days, and you have to wind it all the way back up again. This watch you cannot wear for up to a week and not have to worry about having to rewind it so that you don't have to reset the watch, which I think is fantastic. And I think that this 8-day thing, if you have, and this power reserve, really, if this is, say, like a perpetual calendar, you definitely want a super high power reserve, because those can be absolute pains to reset if you ever need to. But on the wrist here, the 43 millimeter size, I think fits my wrist all right. I have a 7.5-inch wrist, so about a little bit above average size. And I think that it looks, I think that the size, again, I think it's a bit big for a dress watch. I like to see about 38 for a dress watch. I think that's really what my favorite size is for dress watches. The 43 I think is a bit large, but I mean, I think that there's still many people out there, if you have not a super small wrist, I think that you'll be able to pull this watch off just nicely. So this watch comes in, and actually, before I actually go into the kind of conclusion, let's actually talk about the strap. So the strap is a Santoni leather strap for IWC, very comfortable. You have this nice orange, super supple leather on the inside, and then the alligator on the outside. Very comfortable. This leather on the inside, super soft, so definitely no problem there. And then you do get a standard pin buckle clasp. Now, being this is a limited edition, and this comes in actually at a price of $9,900, I think it would have been great to see a deployant clasp. IWC, in my opinion, makes some of the best deployant clasps out there, so I really wish that they would have done that. But so if I were to buy this watch, I would probably get a deployant clasp for it. I just think that that kind of adds a little bit more of elegance to the timepiece, and also just kind of makes it a bit easier to wear every single day, because you won't wear out the strap as quickly, and you don't have to worry about doing the pin buckle every time you put it on your wrist. So with that price of $9,900, this is a limited edition of 1,000 pieces, so it's fairly limited. And I think that this watch offers a lot. It's not a solid gold timepiece. It's still stainless steel, and you're not really going to find, just like kind of comparing this to other watches around the price point, it's about right. I think it might have been nice to be a little bit cheaper, but you are getting the limited edition. I think it offers elegance that a lot of other watches around this price point can't really achieve with this beautiful lacquered dial, blued hands, and I think the movement is absolutely wonderful. So let me know what you guys think. I'd like to mention that this was lent to us by JB Hudson Jewelers in Minneapolis, Minnesota for the purpose of this review. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks.